loud.
Great. Tell me when to start.
You go.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. All right, we're
Hello.
reading about mental wellness from Beyond Diagnosis. Brian Johnson, Alcoholism from the United States. I entered the Gulf Breeze Recovery Program on 6th of July, 2014. At age 42, I had been on 6 different psychiatric medications plus alcohol. I was spiritually, mentally, and physically sick, overweight, and on heavy doses of most of my medications. Dr. Amon's clinic had diagnosed me 1 year earlier as ADD, bipolar 2, and generalized anxiety disorder. I also had self disclosed as an alcoholic. Up to this point, I had spent most of my life being anxious, depressed, and addicted. I was selfish, heading for divorce, and suicidal. In the morning, while fixing my kids' food, I would hold a knife and think about killing myself. The first week I was in treatment, my wife said she wanted to send me divorce papers. At that time, I didn't even care. I was so numb. After sobering up in treatment with the help of my counselor, I started to care again. I started to feel the pain of my actions. Even though my wife still planned on divorcing me, she was talking to me while I was in treatment. She even attended online meetings once a week. This was a very hard time for my family, especially for my 2 daughters. I had left home a month before treatment so I could drink full time and engage in other addictive behaviors. While in treatment, I would talk to my daughters on a regular basis. My youngest one, Megan, just kept saying, "Come home, Daddy," in the sweetest voice. I would go up into my room at night and pray and cry while looking at their pictures. I had left my wife in a mess with credit card debt and 2 kids to care for while she was working full time. We had tried traditional marital and parenting counseling as well as 12-step support groups. Nothing had seemed to work. 2 weeks into treatment, I spoke to the staff about leaving early. I told them that I was needed at home and that I thought I could continue the program there on my own. They said it was good that I was feeling remorse, but that I really should complete the 2-month program. I was told that once I found my own wisdom, life would fall into place and it would be safe to return home. For some reason, I believed them and decided to stay and commit to the program. 2 more weeks passed, and I started to experience a bit of improvement in my mood. I started to see that being and living in the present moment was the full package. On August 4th, interesting, about whatever, 11 years ago today, on August 4th of 2014, during the morning session, I was in a good mood and feeling present. The counselor put on a video of a speaker who spoke emotionally about God's unconditional love for us and that we are not broken. I felt like he was speaking directly to me, and I could feel the words. Instantly, I felt unconditional love wash over me, and I started to weep. I knew that at that moment that it was true. God loves me no matter what, and I am not broken. That same day, I called my wife after lunch and we talked about God for an hour and a half. I felt deep joy and love. No, I we talked about God for half an hour. I felt deep joy and love. The very next day, we talked by video call and I spoke from my heart and soul. I said words I don't remember to this day. The feelings I had for her just poured out of me. That was the moment our marriage began to recover. I felt elated. I knew that regardless of what happened, I would have a friend for life. It was a win-win situation. I told my counselor later that this had been the best day of my life. The counselors ended up being right about suggesting that I stick out the treatment, and not leave early. I continued to make good progress in my treatment. During this time, I reacquainted myself with Sydney Banks. I read The Enlightened Gardener and was deeply affected by the messages it held for me. I progressed more quickly and deeply and found my own positive feeling and my own wisdom. The doctors were able to dramatically reduce my medications. My treatment was coming to an end. I requested my wife to hold off on the divorce for 1 month after I got home so she could just spend time with me and see that I was truly different and had really changed this time. She agreed. On August 30th, 2014, I left treatment knowing deep within that it was time to go home and join my wife up north for a camping trip. The kids were staying with friends. We hiked together and talked at dinner as friends, truly enjoying each other's company for the first time in years. At first, I chose to live in a sober house and attend 12-step meetings, spending as much time as possible with my family. Even though the school year had already started, I started looking for a teaching position. I called my old employer and told her about my spiritual transformation, and she offered me a job. I moved home, and our family began to experience a life full of blessings. It struck me how 1 year prior I had the exact same life circumstances, and now I was living life with a fresh new outlook. I felt joy and had a sense of humor again. I cried a lot and still do, but it is out of love and gratitude for my life. I smile more and it feels good to be alive and awake. I started writing and posting messages and quotes on Facebook, and people have really responded positively to my messages. I started inspiring people with my story and inspirational and spiritual quotes. My daughter Nora told me she likes the new daddy better. I didn't even tell her that I had changed. She noticed it on her own. My wife loves the change in me, although at times she has said it is unnerving. She has been with me since 1999, and now I was suddenly a new person. My job and our financial situation improved, and we refinanced our house to pay off some debt. We worked together with a three principles practitioner for about 2 months, and I've continued to work with her twice a month in the beginning and now on an as needed basis. Every aspect of my life has improved. My mood, my weight, my overall health, my level of satisfaction with life, my relationships, my work. I can still be in a low mood, but it's not as bad and does not last as long. I feel my negative emotions now and just let them pass through. Sometimes I grab a hold of them, and soon afterwards I ask myself, what was that all about? I am currently less medicated and function better than I did when I was heavily medicated prior to entering Gulf Breeze. I exercise on a regular basis and take time to focus on love and gratitude. I listen to music a lot more now, and I can feel it. It is wonderful. When I get stuck or I need a refresher, I usually listen to a Sydney Banks recording on my commute to or from work. I love how he gets right to the point in his talks, and I have found listening to him to be a wonderful support. Sometimes I talk to another person who knows about the three principles who's a peer, and that helps me get unstuck. I give back by sharing my story with Gulf Breeze guests, usually once a year or on or near my sobriety anniversary. I am currently a real estate appraiser, an author, and a father. I'm not sure what my future holds, whether I will continue what I am doing or do something else. All I know is that God has a plan, and I will know what to do when it is time to know. I truly believe there is a feeling that guides us from the cradle to the grave, and we just need to listen to its guidance. Life is a spiritual journey to me and not a destination.
Read show.
Okay, hold on 1 second. I have to bring it back up on the screen. There it is. Okay.
Alcoholism, Sally Weiss, UK. The first time I got drunk was at age 5 when my mom announced to all her friends at a drunken party that she had tried to abort me with a bottle of gin and a hot bath. I had no idea that this event would have such a huge effect on my mental health, self esteem, and confidence until 2015 when I had an insight through the three principles. I drank alcohol throughout my teens, but it really increased when I met my first boyfriend. He was 10 years older than me. So going to the pub every night was all he wanted to do, and I loved it. This became a habit. I couldn't leave the pub until I had at least 5 drinks, and at the weekend, far more. I was inebriated 7 nights a week to different extremes. Consequently, at the weekend, I would wake with a terrible hangover. I soon realized if I had 5 halves at lunchtime, hair of a dog, my hangover would go. The highlight the highlighted for me now quickly how quickly I got entrapped in the addiction cycle of thinking and the illusion that alcohol fixed the feeling and gave me confidence. I met my second boyfriend and my drinking stepped up a gear. I worked as a senior science technician during the day, and in the evening I worked in a pub. This was the perfect scenario for me as I could see my new boyfriend and help myself to free drinks for both of us whilst being paid. After work, we'd go to a nightclub and consume more and more alcohol. I was drunk 7 nights a week and still drinking excessively during lunchtimes at the weekend. If I couldn't get a drink by noon, I became very anxious and angry. This also became a pattern in the evening. I had to have my first drink by 5 p.m. if I was going out for the evening. I was often drunk before I even got out the door. I ruined so many events, but by morning I would have forgotten what I'd done. This started to affect my work as I was having to have days off sick with anxiety, depression, and the hangover from hell. This began to affect my physical and mental health terribly. I felt physically sick, anxious, and shaky, and found it impossible to concentrate at work. I started taking more and more time off work. I couldn't go to work because I felt so ill, so I drank to feel better. But then I couldn't go to work because I was drunk. Eventually, my GP put me in touch with a local alcohol service called SIAS. I also attended groups, and gradually, I began to get more control of my drinking and felt confident I could cope with my new job as a microbiologist. After some persuasion from me, I got my colleagues to go to the pub every lunchtime. I was very good at manipulating people for my gain. No one realized the extent of my drinking, as I was very deceitful. If I was on a late shift, I would drink to excess before work to stop the shakes and get me through the day. I had to rush to the car every hour or so to top up, and yes, I was now drunk driving. I began to shake from head to foot in the morning and would have heaved trying to get the first drink down. I began to vomit every morning. This was awful. I felt so ill, but I continued regardless. This went on for years. I felt physically and mentally ill and couldn't see a way out. I was still attending the alcohol service, and my counselor decided I desperately needed a detox. So in 2009, I was admitted to a treatment center. We were treated like animals, and the shame and guilt inflicted on us was immense. I felt so alone and sad. It was a very scary place to be. I cried nearly every day for the first month, but I was determined to stay the course. I had little contact with family or friends, which was very upsetting, as my dad was at home, confined to his room after a recent stroke. I missed him so much. I emerged 3 months later, a shadow of my former self. I'd lost weight, my confidence was shot, and I had no self esteem or respect. The saving grace was I was sober and vowed never to drink again. This lasted for 7 months. I'd been attending AA since my discharge from the treatment center, but was finding it very tough not having my medicine. Eventually, the craving to have a drink became overwhelming, but I thought I could control it if I just had a few in the evening. The first drink really hit the spot, and I promised myself I would only have a few drinks every evening. One glass of wine soon led to a bottle, and before long, I was back to square one, drinking all day, time off work, and a massive deterioration in my mental and physical health. I was absolutely devastated. How could I let myself get back to this? My performance at work plummeted. I couldn't complete even the simplest tasks. I was constantly letting everyone down with my incompetence. I lost another job. I was now out of work feeling extremely anxious and emotional. I sunk into the darkest depression. I was lying, cheating, and deceiving my friends and family. I was even stealing alcohol from their houses to feed my addiction. My life was out of control. I had nothing. I committed myself to another treatment center, and the cycle began again. Sobriety for 7 months, then just one drink, leading to carnage and destruction. I lost another job that ended in a humiliating tribunal. This felt like an absolute rock bottom. I had no job, money, friends, or family that wanted me. I got arrested for drunk driving and received a criminal conviction. I was lucky not to be sent to prison. Life couldn't get any worse. I was vomiting every morning, not eating, not looking after my hygiene. I felt so alone and desperate, I just wanted to die. I even had several attempts at taking my own life with overdoses of paracetamol and pain-killing drugs on top of the alcohol. The pattern continued for 6 years in and out of treatment centers, desperate to find a solution to my addiction. In December 2014, I was rushed into Warwick Hospital with acidosis and hypothermia on the brink of death. My day started at 6 a.m. every morning when I would take about 2 hours of drinking gin, vomiting, drinking, vomiting. Eventually, the shaking would pass, and I felt ready to face the day. I was constantly topping up the alcohol during the day, either sneaking it into the garage or taking Mum, who was suffering from cancer, to the pub, pretending to her this was my first drink of the day. Then one night I went to bed at normal at 8 p.m. and began to sweat like never before. I spent most of the night changing everything that was wet through. I began to shiver, so I started my drinking regime to try and relieve the symptoms. This time I could not keep the alcohol down. I had to call an ambulance. I had no idea I was dying. I was a glibbering wreck. I was even talking to people that weren't there. I felt like I was going mad. In 2014, I was admitted to a treatment center where I actually was treated like a human being for once. I started to tend AA and got a sponsor and was gradually working through the 12 steps. Then, in March of 2015, I started seeing a coach who introduced me to the three principles, and I started having insights about my life and addiction. I attended a 2-day event with Jack Bransky, which was the absolute turning point for me, and I felt like I had been reborn. I had so many insights about what happened to me when I was 5 that I thought had caused me to feel unloved, insecure with low self-esteem and confidence. I realized alcohol was my way of coping, not realizing it had the opposite effect. I began to see that I was always okay, but for my thinking. No one had made me drink. It was all down to me, and I didn't need anything to feel okay. I started volunteering at the addiction company where I was a client for so long. I then became an alcohol counselor. Absolutely love it and feel my journey of addiction was serendipitous as I would never have found the three principles. If I had not been seeking help, I would be forever grateful to Jack Pransky and, of course, Sid Banks, who guided me home through their teaching. My name is Sally, and I'm not an alcoholic.
Jalen, I guess.
I will be glad. I'd be glad to. Hold on. I went to the beginning. All right. Butler addiction in New Zealand. Go ahead, Nancy.
Okay. Yeah. I was very young when I first started struggling with mental health problems. I didn't know what to do with my emotions at the time. I didn't have the emotional intelligence to know and understand what I was feeling or why I was feeling it. It was just an overwhelming experience. I was 12 years old when I first attempted to take my own life by way of a drug overdose. As I got older, I started having mood and emotional issues. Sounds like she already was. My drinking habit started when I was 17. Booze helped me escape from myself. It was like there was a numbing. I was no longer having to worry about what I was feeling and what I was experiencing. I lived in a broken home with an abusive stepfather. My mom didn't really stick up for me. It was pretty hard, and I was getting bullied at school. I got the diagnosis of bipolar 1 when I was 22. I had a mental breakdown and ended up in the psychiatric ward at the hospital. They told me I have a chemical imbalance in my brain, which makes me experience frequent and regular mood swings. They told me that I was going to be on medication for the rest of my life to manage the chemical imbalance so I could cope better with my emotions. For 4 years, I went on lots of antidepressants, mood stabilizing medications, and sleeping pills. But I was drinking a lot, smoking a lot of marijuana, and abusing a few other drugs as well at the same time. Back in 2011, my GP noticed that none of the medications they were giving me were helping. So she got me off all the mood stabilizing medications, sleep medication, everything. And I went on a lifestyle therapy program in Australia, which actually got me back into work, back into hobbies, and into building friendships and that sort of thing. So it basically started me on a self help journey. That's when I started reading lots of books and going to seminars to try and better myself. But I was still drinking, still using drugs. I did go through AA in Australia, but I was surrounded by people that were heavy drinkers. AA helped, but I just ended up back to square one, back drinking again, mainly for social reasons, but kept drinking while I was alone at home as well. I was constantly told in AA that it was a disease. Well, I got told the same thing when I got diagnosed as bipolar. They said it's a lifelong mental illness and you just have to be on medication for the rest of your life. I think it's a big misunderstanding. Just think about it for a minute. Every single human being has moods and mood changes, and they can change really quickly. We can be irrational and we can make poor decisions, and then we can make good decisions and everything in between. We can experience a plethora of emotions throughout the day. That's the beauty of being a human being, is that you get to feel your thinking. That's not a disease, it's being human. I met a girl and we started dating. It was really good, and I was trying my best to do everything I could to make her happy. We had a disagreement, and she told me, "You don't make me happy anymore." I was furious and confused. I went for a long walk. It was about 10 o'clock at night. As I was walking, I had all these thoughts racing through my mind, but I kept coming back to this quote that I'd heard. I don't know who actually said the quote, but it's about happiness. Happiness is an inside job. I heard this repeating in my head. Happiness is an inside job. Happiness is an inside job. I thought, well, if happiness is an inside job, it's not my responsibility to make her or anybody happy. It's their responsibility. Then the penny dropped. I was like, wait, so that must mean that every single other human emotion is an inside job. Wow. This hit me. And I was like, oh my God. So I can either choose to be an emotional mess or I can choose to be happy. The light bulb went off in my head and I was just ecstatic. I have no words for how I felt. After a few months, I was sort of curious to know if there was something out there that it could explain the experience that I'd had. So I talked to a friend and he asked me if I'd heard of Jamie Smart. I hadn't, so he recommended that I get a copy of Jamie's book, Clarity. I read Jamie's book and it introduced me to the three principles and the work of Sydney Banks. This was exactly what I had a realization around. Our thinking creates our feelings, which creates our behavior. And we're always just living in the feeling of our thinking. A year later, in July 2019, I went sober. My best friend's brother had committed suicide. He just drank himself to death, basically, and ended up hanging himself. This light bulb went off in my head again. If I'm drinking and taking drugs, what am I running from? What am I trying to escape? I saw it was 100% escapism. All I was ever trying to do was escape from my feelings. I never knew what to do with them. They were so unbearable that I felt that I had to take a substance or do an activity to make those feelings and emotions go away. I'd feel better, but it was always fleeting. So my mate went sober for a month for dry July. So I tried dry July as well. After that, I was like, well, I don't need to drink because I'm not trying to escape from anything anymore. I've been sober now for 4 years. Nothing has been as helpful to me as the three principles. The standout thing for me was that we're never broken. We just suffer from a misunderstanding of where our experience of life is coming from. I think the turning point for me was definitely making the connection that I was trying to escape, that alcohol and drugs were an escape from reality. I'm a consultant to an engineering firm, and feedback from our client was that we're not producing work on time. My ears would always pick up at work, and I'd hear people talking about how stressed they were. Right. So I ended up suggesting to my manager that I share the three principles with everybody about how to better understand stress. Now, other managers and other teams can see that our team is doing something different than everybody else. We seem to be a lot more productive, a lot happier. We have no fear of communicating how we think and feel. We now have a solid team. Relationships are so much easier when we have less on our minds, like the relationship that I'm in now. I've never had a relationship like that before, like ever. I introduced the three principles to Louise, my fiance, and it just clicked for her too. Her son suffers really bad anxiety. So one day when he was having an anxiety attack before school, I talked to him and helped him calm down and helped him to understand what he was actually feeling. Now he's in high school and he's surrounded by all his friends that are suffering with depression and anxiety, and he's helping them as well. So I'm no longer dependent on drugs or alcohol or treatment programs. I have great relationships at home and work. I don't have a mental health disease. I no longer suffer from the misunderstanding that the world or life in general is what causes me to feel the way I do at any moment. This has meant that I am free from ever beating myself up or resorting to an escape to get away from myself. Thoughts come and go, and so do our feelings. And the principles have enabled me to remain happier than I ever thought was possible. There are still all the other feelings which pass on by, much like the weather. But I know now not to buy into my personal thinking because the mind does what minds do. When I show up to life, I do so with peace, love, and ecstatic bliss beyond words. The principles saved my life.